I sat in the attorney's office 3 days after burying my husband of 43 years, and I could barely breathe. Across the mahogany conference table, Brittany drummed her perfectly manicured nails, that smile playing at her crimson lips. Just this morning, she'd cornered me in the funeral home parking lot and whispered with absolute certainty, "You'll get nothing from Richard's $68 million, Sandy." He told Derek everything. We made sure of it. Now, Mr. Harrison was opening the will, and my daughter-in-law's smile widened, like she already knew what was coming. My hands trembled in my lap. Mr. Harrison adjusted his reading glasses and began. The conference room felt suffocating despite the air conditioning humming overhead. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as he started reading in that measured attorney voice they all seemed to perfect in law school. I, Richard Thomas Harris, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. His voice carried through the silence. Derek sat rigid beside Brittany, refusing to meet my eyes. My son looked like a stranger in his expensive suit, one I knew Brittany had picked out. Mr. Harrison continued through the preliminaries. Richard's business, Harris Manufacturing Solutions, valued at $42 million. The real estate holdings spanning 3 states, worth $18 million. Investment portfolios, retirement accounts, life insurance policies, totaling another $8 million. The numbers felt abstract, meaningless. Richard was gone. That's all that mattered to me. To the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I bequeath $50,000, Mr. Harrison's voice droned on. To Mercy Hospital Cancer Research, $100,000. To my alma mater, Penn State University, $25,000 for the Engineering Scholarship Fund. Brittany leaned forward, her breathing quickening. I could see the calculation in her dark eyes, adding up what remained. Then, Mr. Harrison reached the main bequest. To my beloved wife, Sandy Margaret Harris, who has stood by my side through every success and every failure, who has been my partner, my confidant, and my greatest blessing, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including, but not limited to Harris Manufacturing Solutions, all real property located in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, all investment accounts, all personal property, and any and all other assets not previously bequeathed. The room seemed to tilt. Brittany's face went from confident to white in the space of a heartbeat. Her manicured nails stopped drumming. "That's impossible." She shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with an ugly screech. Mr. Harrison looked up calmly, as if women screamed in his office every day. "I assure you, Mrs. Harris, the will is quite clear and was properly executed with 3 witnesses present." Derek finally looked at me, but there was no warmth in his gaze, just shock and something else, something that made my stomach clench with dread. Brittany's shock transformed before my eyes. The color returned to her cheeks. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She sat back down slowly, deliberately, smoothing her designer skirt. "Well," she said, her voice suddenly calm, calculated. "That's interesting. Very interesting indeed." Mr. Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Harris?" "No problem at all." Brittany pulled out her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. "No problem whatsoever." Derek whispered urgently, "Britt, what are you doing?" She didn't look up from her phone. "Implementing Plan B, honey." Her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Loud enough for me to hear. I found my voice. "What do you mean, Plan B?" "Derek, honey, can we talk about this privately?" My son stood abruptly. "I think you've done enough, Mom." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Done enough? Derek, what are you talking about?" But he was already moving toward the door, Brittany following gracefully behind him. She paused at the threshold, looking back at me with something like pity mixed with triumph. 6 months is a very long time, Sandy." Her voice was sweet as poisoned honey. "A lot can happen in 6 months. We'll see you very soon, in court." They left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I sat frozen, my mind spinning. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harris, do you have any idea what she meant by that?" I shook my head numbly. "I don't understand. Why would Derek be angry? Richard was his father. Unfortunately, will contests do happen." Mr. Harrison gathered his papers with efficient movements. "They're not common, but when significant assets are involved, disappointed heirs sometimes challenge the will's validity. But Richard wanted me to have everything. He told me so." My voice sounded small, frightened. "The will must go through probate regardless, which typically takes about 6 months in Pennsylvania. It should be straightforward. You can access some funds immediately for living expenses. I'll file the paperwork tomorrow." He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Try not to worry, Mrs. Harris. The will is airtight." But as I drove home alone, Richard's empty passenger seat, a constant reminder of my loss, I couldn't shake the image of Brittany's smile. That confidence, that certainty. My phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the button on the steering wheel. "Mrs. Harris?" A man's voice, official and serious. "This is Detective Morrison with the Philadelphia Police Department. We need to speak with you about your late husband's death. Today. It's urgent." I nearly swerved into the next lane. My heart hammered against my ribs. "What? Why?" "Richard died of cancer," the doctors said. "Ma'am, your son and daughter-in-law have filed a report. We need to speak with you about allegations of elder abuse and possible undue influence. Can you come to the station within the hour?" The world spun. Elder abuse? Undue influence? The words didn't make sense. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Neither do I yet, ma'am. That's why we need to talk. The address is—" I pulled over into a gas station parking lot, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't drive. Detective Morrison was still talking, giving me an address, telling me to come alone, that I didn't need a lawyer yet, but I could bring one if I wanted. A lawyer? For what? For taking care of my dying husband? I made it to the police station in a daze. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the chairs too hard, the air too cold. Detective Morrison turned out to be a man in his 50s, with kind eyes that didn't match the harsh questions he asked. We sat in a small interview room. Him, another detective named Chen, and me. A recording device blinked red on the table between us. "Mrs. Harris, when did your husband first show signs of dementia?" The question startled me. "About 8 months ago. He started forgetting small things. Appointments, names of people we'd known for years. The doctor said it was early stage." "Which doctor?" "Dr. Feldman. His primary care physician for 20 years. Detective Chen wrote something down. "Did he see any other doctors?" "Of course. Oncologists. The cancer team at University Hospital." "Any other doctors? Perhaps ones you didn't know about?" I frowned. "No. Why would Richard see doctors I didn't know about?" The detectives exchanged a glance. Detective Morrison slid a paper across the table. "This is a record from Dr. Patricia Coleman, a geriatric specialist. She saw your husband 6 times over 6 months. Her office is in Radnor. Did you know about these appointments?" I stared at the paper. Richard's name. Dates and times I didn't recognize. Appointments that happened while I thought he was at the office or running errands. "No." My voice came out barely above a whisper. "I didn't know." According to Dr. Coleman's notes, your husband expressed concerns about feeling pressured, about financial decisions, about changes to his will. Detective Morrison's voice was gentle, but relentless. "Did you pressure your husband about his will, Mrs. Harris?" "No. Richard changed his will because I stopped. Because of Derek's gambling. But Richard had sworn me to secrecy. He was planning to tell Derek himself, to get him into treatment first, to do it with love and care. Not like this. Not with accusations and police interrogations. Because why, Mrs. Harris? It's complicated. Family matters. Private matters. Your son claims you isolated his father from him, that you prevented visits. That you manipulated a sick, vulnerable man. Detective Chen's voice was harder than his partner's. That's not true. Derek has a gambling problem. Richard paid off his debts twice, over $300,000. Richard wanted to protect the family business until Derek got help. Can you prove that? Richard's bank records should show. We've reviewed the bank records. Large withdrawals, yes, but nothing indicating where the money went. No casino transactions. No checks to Derek. Because Richard paid the loan sharks in cash. Because he was protecting Derek's reputation. Because he was a good father even when his son didn't deserve it. The questioning went on for 3 hours. About Richard's medications. About who had access to him. About the timing of the will change. About bruises documented. On Richard's arms in Dr. Coleman's notes. Bruises? I repeated, horrified. What bruises? They showed me photographs. Richard's arms, marked with finger-shaped bruises. Purple and yellow, captured in clinical medical photographs. I never hurt him. Tears streamed down my face. I never touched him except to help him, to comfort him. Can you explain the bruises, Mrs. Harris? No, I can't. I don't know where they came from. Finally, they let me leave. No arrest, but their words followed me. Don't leave the state. We'll be in touch. This investigation is ongoing. I made it to my car before breaking down completely, sobbing in the driver's seat of the Honda Richard bought me for our 40th anniversary. Everything was falling apart. My phone buzzed. Mr. Harrison. I answered with trembling fingers. Mrs. Harris, I have bad news. Brittany Harris has filed a formal will contest. She's alleging undue influence and questioning your husband's mental capacity at the time he changed his will. Judge Caldwell has issued a temporary freeze on the estate, pending a hearing. What does that mean? It means you can't access any of Richard's assets. No money from his accounts. No proceeds from the business. Nothing until this is resolved. But I need the mortgage payment is due next week. I have bills. Richard's medical bills that haven't been paid yet. I'm sorry. The freeze is immediate. You'll need to use your personal funds for now. My personal funds. $12,000 in my checking account. That was all I had in my own name. Everything else was joint with Richard, now frozen. Inaccessible. How long will this take? If it goes to trial, it could be months. You'll need to respond to the contest within 30 days. And Mrs. Harris, I practice estate law, not litigation. For something this complex, you'll need a specialist, someone experienced in will contests. How much will that cost? His hesitation told me everything. A good litigator will require a retainer of at least $50,000. $50,000 I didn't have. I tried calling Derek 17 times that evening. He didn't answer. Finally, at 11 o'clock at night, he picked up. What do you want? His voice was cold, distant. Derek, please. We need to talk about this. Your father loved you. He was trying to protect you. Protect me from my own inheritance? That's a convenient story now that he's dead and can't defend himself. He wanted to tell you himself. He was planning to, after we got you into treatment. He loved you so much. If he loved me, he wouldn't have left me nothing. And you made sure of that, didn't you? You poisoned him against me. That's not true. I saw him, Mom. In those last months. He was scared of you. He told me once that he couldn't think straight anymore. That you were always there, always watching, always telling him what to do. Because he was sick, because he needed help, or because you were controlling a vulnerable old man to steal my inheritance. The words cut deeper than any knife. Derek, please. I'm your mother. My mother wouldn't do what you did. He hung up. I called back. He'd blocked my number. I sat in the house Richard and I bought 37 years ago, surrounded by memories of our life together, and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. Mr. Harrison called again the next morning. Mrs. Harris, you need to know who you're up against. Brittany has retained Jonathan Fletcher. He's one of the top estate litigators in Pennsylvania. He's known for winning undue influence cases. His track record is formidable. And you think I should get someone similar? I think you need the best lawyer you can afford. I can recommend Margaret Sullivan. She's excellent. But her retainer is $50,000. $50,000. I'd have to scrape together from somewhere. Anywhere. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered, expecting another detective. Sandy? It's Grace. My best friend's voice. Thank God. Someone who still cared. Honey, I don't know how to tell you this. Someone posted about you online. You need to see what they're saying. Grace sent me links. I opened Facebook first. My hands trembled as I scrolled through Brittany's posts. The first showed a picture of Richard from 2 months before he died. He looked frail, thin, his eyes cloudy. I was beside him in the photo, my hand on his shoulder. The caption read, "This is what elder abuse looks like." My father-in-law spent his final months terrified and confused, while someone took advantage of his vulnerability. The authorities are now investigating. Please, share to raise awareness. Over 3,000 shares. Hundreds of comments. That poor man, the wife always gets away with it. I hope they lock her up. Gold digger waited for him to die. The next post was worse. A long, heartfelt statement from Brittany about how she'd watched helplessly as I isolated Richard from his loving son. How Derek wasn't even allowed to visit his own father without me present. How Richard had confided in her that he was scared but couldn't escape. Every word was a lie. Every single word. But thousands of people believed it. I tried to respond. I typed out my side of the story, explaining about Derek's gambling, about Richard's plan, about the truth. I hit post. Within minutes, the comments poured in. Classic abuser behavior, blaming the victim. Trying to destroy her own son's reputation to cover her crimes. She's making up stories about gambling. Where's the proof? I always thought there was something off about her. That last comment was from Barbara Chen, someone I'd known from church for 15 years. Someone I'd served on committees with. Someone I thought was my friend. I tried to go to the grocery store the next day. I needed food. I had $17 left, after paying what bills I could. The whispers started in the produce section. 2 women I recognized from the neighborhood. They stopped talking when they saw me, then leaned together and whispered more urgently. At the checkout, the cashier who'd rung up my groceries every week for 10 years wouldn't meet my eyes. She scanned my items in silence. Didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't comment on the weather. Just took my money and handed me my change without a word. In the parking lot, a man approached me. His face was red with anger. "You should be ashamed of yourself." He actually yelled it, loud enough that people turned to stare. "That poor man trusted you." I fumbled with my car keys, dropped them, picked them up with shaking hands. "I didn't do anything," I tried to say. "That's what they all say. I hope they put you away for the rest of your life." I drove home crying so hard I could barely see the road. Sunday, I went to church. I'd attended the same church for 30 years. The same pew, third from the front, on the left side. Richard and I had been married there. Derek had been baptized there. I walked in and felt the temperature drop. People who'd hugged me at Richard's funeral now looked away. I sat in my usual pew. The couple who normally sat beside us moved to a different section. After the service, Pastor Williams approached me. His face was kind but strained. "Sandy, I think perhaps it would be best if you took some time away from the congregation, just until this legal matter is resolved." "You're asking me to leave?" "I'm suggesting that your presence is causing discomfort for other members. They're concerned. You understand." I understood perfectly. I was being expelled from my own church based on lies. I left and never went back. That afternoon, I made my decision. I went to the jewelry box Richard gave me on our wedding day. Inside were my engagement ring, my wedding band, a pearl necklace that had been my mother's, diamond earrings from our 25th anniversary. I took everything to a jeweler downtown, someone who didn't know me, didn't recognize my name. "I can give you $18,000 for the lot," he said after examining everything. They're worth more than that. Retail value, yes. But I have to resell them. That's my offer. I took it. Then, I went to the bank and liquidated my small retirement account. The penalties ate up 30%, but I walked away with another $31,000. $49,000 total. Still 1,000 short of Margaret Sullivan's retainer. I sold my car. The Honda Richard bought me. Got another $8,000 for it. Now I had enough. I called Margaret Sullivan's office and made an appointment. Margaret was in her mid-50s, sharp-eyed, expensively dressed. Her office overlooked City Hall. The walls were lined with law books and framed degrees. "I've reviewed the initial filings," she said after I'd told her my story. "Mrs. Harris, I'm going to be honest with you. This case is going to be extremely difficult, but I didn't do anything wrong. That may be true, but perception matters. The medical records show your husband had dementia. They show he complained about feeling pressured. They show physical injuries. The will was changed shortly after his dementia diagnosis. The timing looks suspicious. Richard changed it to protect Derek from gambling debts. Can you prove Derek's gambling? There were bank records, large withdrawals, but they're gone. Someone took them from Richard's office. Margaret wrote something on her legal pad. Who had access to the office? Me, Derek. He has a key. Brittany must have taken them. Again, can you prove that? I couldn't. I couldn't prove anything. Margaret continued. Jonathan Fletcher is very good at what he does. He'll paint a picture of a vulnerable, sick man being manipulated by his wife. He'll use the medical records, the timing, the documented injuries. And without evidence to counter the narrative, a jury might believe him. What do I do? We fight. We investigate. We find evidence that supports your version. But I need you to understand, this could take months. It could cost significantly more than the retainer. And there's no guarantee we'll win. I signed her paperwork, paid the $57,000, walked out with $18 in my checking account, and no way to earn more. The preliminary hearing was 2 weeks later. Judge Caldwell was a stern woman in her late 50s. She listened to both sides present their arguments. Jonathan Fletcher was everything Margaret warned me about. Smooth, confident, compelling. He showed the medical records, talked about Richard's vulnerability, showed photographs of the bruises, painted me as a calculating predator. Margaret fought back, but without solid evidence, it felt like throwing paper at a brick wall. Judge Caldwell ruled, the estate will remain frozen until a full trial. Given the serious nature of the allegations, I'm setting the trial date for 4 months from now. Both parties will have adequate time to prepare their cases. 4 months. 4 months with no income, no access to money, no way to survive. I tried to pay my mortgage the next week. The bank refused my check. Insufficient funds. I'd bounced a payment for the first time in 37 years. The foreclosure notice came 3 weeks later. I called Margaret in tears. I can't pay my mortgage. I'm going to lose my house. Unfortunately, we can't access the estate funds. Is there anyone who can help? Family? Friends? Derek had blocked me. I had no other family. And my friends had all abandoned me based on Brittany's lies. Except Grace. Grace called that evening. Sandy, I heard about the house. Move in with me. I have a spare room. It's small, but it's yours for as long as you need. I cried with relief. Are you sure? With everything people are saying? I've known you for 30 years. I don't believe a word of it. Pack your things. I'll help you move tomorrow. I packed one suitcase. Everything else went into a storage unit I paid for with my last credit card that wasn't maxed out. 43 years of marriage, 43 years of memories, reduced to 10 boxes in a concrete room. Grace's apartment was in a building downtown, small but clean. The spare room was barely big enough for a twin bed. I slept on a pull-out couch in her living room instead. I'm sorry, I kept saying. Hush, Grace said firmly. This is what friends do. But I could see the strain. Grace was retired, living on Social Security, feeding 2 people instead of 1. The extra utilities, the extra everything. I tried to find work. At 67, nobody wanted to hire me, especially not once they Googled my name and found Brittany's posts. Then Brittany's lawyer filed another lawsuit. Defamation. Claimed I was spreading lies about Derek's gambling. Demanded I retract all statements and pay $50,000 in damages. Margaret was furious. This is a tactic to drain your resources. They know you can't afford to fight on 2 fronts. But I had to. If I didn't respond to the defamation suit, I'd lose by default. Margaret agreed to handle both cases, but she needed more money. I had nothing left to give. My blood pressure spiked one night. Grace found me collapsed in the bathroom. The ambulance ride to the emergency room. The tests. The diagnosis of stress-induced hypertension. The hospital bill. $8,300. I had no insurance. I'd been on Richard's plan through his company. That ended when he died. The hospital sent me home with prescriptions I couldn't afford to fill. 3 days later, a process server came to Grace's apartment. A restraining order. Derek claimed I'd been harassing him, calling repeatedly, threatening him. I hadn't called him in weeks. Not since he blocked my number. But the restraining order was granted anyway. I couldn't go within 500 feet of my own son. I sat on Grace's couch at 2 a.m, everything crashing down. I'd lost my husband. I'd lost my son. I'd lost my home, my money, my reputation, my health. I had nothing left. Maybe I should just give up, I whispered to the darkness. Let Brittany have everything. Richard died for nothing. Grace found me crying. She sat beside me, held my hand, said nothing. What was there to say? The phone rang at 7 a.m, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Harris? My name is Dr. Patricia Coleman. I was your husband's doctor, the one you didn't know about. The woman's voice was shaking. I've been following your case in the news. I can't sleep anymore. What they're saying about you, what Derek and Brittany are claiming. I need to tell you something. I violated patient confidentiality to meet with Brittany 6 months ago, and I've been sick about it ever since. I'm willing to testify. But there's something you need to know first. I'm the one who documented those bruises on Richard's arms, and I know exactly how he got them. I met Dr. Coleman at a coffee shop in Bryn Mawr, 30 minutes outside the city. She'd chosen the location carefully, somewhere neither of us would be recognized. She sat in a corner booth, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, as I slid into the booth across from her. Her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself, even though it was 75 degrees outside. "You said you know about the bruises." My voice came out harsh. I'd spent so long being accused that I'd almost forgotten how to be anything but defensive. "I do. But first, I need to explain why Richard came to me." Dr. Coleman glanced around the coffee shop nervously. "He called my office 8 months ago. Said he'd been having memory problems. He wanted a diagnosis, but he didn't want you to know." "Why not?" "He said he didn't want you to treat him differently. He said you were already dealing with so much, with his cancer, with everything. He was scared that if you knew he was losing his mind, you'd stop seeing him as your partner. You'd start seeing him as a patient." Tears stung my eyes. That was exactly like Richard. Always trying to protect me, even from his own pain. I diagnosed him with early-stage dementia, started him on medication, saw him every 2 weeks. Dr. Coleman's voice dropped lower. In our 4th session, I noticed bruises on his forearms. Finger-shaped marks. I asked him about them. My breath caught. What did he say? He said Derek had grabbed him. That Derek had come to the house 3 times that month while you were out. That Derek was desperate for money. That the conversations had gotten physical. The coffee shop seemed to tilt. Derek hurt his own father? Richard said Derek wasn't violent. Exactly. Just desperate. Insistent. He'd grab Richard's arms, shake him a little, trying to make him understand how serious the debts were. Richard said Derek was terrified, that people were threatening him. The loan sharks, I whispered. Richard paid them off. Twice, he told me. Over $300,000 total. But Derek kept gambling, kept getting in deeper. Richard told me he'd decided to change his will. Not to punish Derek, but to protect him. To protect the family business until Derek got help. Why didn't you tell anyone this? Dr. Coleman's face crumpled. Patient confidentiality. I couldn't. And then, Brittany called my office. When? 6 months ago. The same day Richard met with his lawyer to change his will. Dr. Coleman pulled out her phone, showed me her call log. See? 3:47 in the afternoon. She said she was Richard's healthcare proxy. She said she needed to understand his condition because she was coordinating his care. But she wasn't his healthcare proxy. I was. I know that now. But she was convincing. She had details about his condition that made me think she was legitimate. She asked very specific questions. Did Richard ever complain about feeling pressured? Yes, I said, thinking she meant pressured by his illness. Did I document any injuries? Yes, I said, thinking I was being thorough. She took everything I said and twisted it. She made it sound like I was abusing him. Yes, Dr. Coleman's voice broke. I didn't realize what she was doing until after Richard died, until I saw the news reports, until I understood how my records were being used. I've been carrying this guilt for months. Will you testify? Will you tell the court what really happened? That's why I'm here. But you need to understand something. If I testify about what Richard told me, I'm violating doctor-patient privilege. Patient confidentiality survives death. The medical board will come after me. I could lose my license to practice medicine. The weight of what she was offering crashed over me. You have children? 2, 7 and 9 years old. I'm a single mother. If I lose my license, I lose everything. My income, my career, my ability to support my kids. Then you can't testify. But if I don't, you'll lose everything. We sat in silence, 2 women trapped between impossible choices. There might be a way, Dr. Coleman said slowly. If the court rules that patient privilege is waived because Richard's mental state is at issue in the case, if his capacity is being questioned, then information about his mental state becomes relevant. It's a gray area, but it's possible. And if the judge doesn't rule that way, then I testify anyway and deal with the consequences. I can't let you be destroyed because of my mistake in talking to Brittany. I reached across the table and took her hand. I can't let you destroy your life for me. What choice do we have? The same question I'd been asking myself for weeks. I called Margaret as soon as I left the coffee shop, told her everything Dr. Coleman had said. We need her testimony, Margaret said immediately. It changes everything. It proves Derek was the abusive one, not you. It proves Richard had good reasons for changing his will, but it could cost her everything. Sandy, this is your life, your entire future. You have to be willing to fight for it. But was I willing to destroy someone else's life to save my own? I spent the night at Grace's apartment, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Dr. Coleman's words echoed in my head. So did Margaret's. In the morning, I made a decision. I called Margaret back. I want to hire a private investigator, someone who can dig into Derek's finances, find proof of the gambling, the debts, the payments Richard made. If we can prove that part of the story, maybe, Dr. Coleman's testimony becomes less risky. That's going to cost money you don't have. Then I'll find it somewhere. Margaret hired an investigator named Paul Rodriguez. He charged $2,000 plus expenses. I had no idea where I'd get the money, but I signed the contract anyway. Paul worked fast. Within a week, he'd found bank records showing Derek's accounts going from 0 to 50,000 and back to 0 repeatedly. Cash withdrawals from Richard's personal account that matched the timing of Derek's deposits. Records from Atlantic City casinos showing Derek's player card activity. But then, Paul hit a wall. Derek's most recent debts were to a loan shark named Vincent Corso. Corso had a criminal record for assault and extortion. He'd been paid off by Richard twice, but the payments were in cash. No paper trail except the withdrawals from Richard's account. "We can prove Derek had a gambling problem," Paul reported. "We can prove Richard paid out large sums of cash, but we can't directly connect the two without testimony from someone involved." "Can you talk to Vincent Corso?" I tried. He told me to get lost in terms that were much less polite. He's not going to testify about anything. So close, but still not enough. Then Brittany found out about the investigation. I don't know how. Maybe she had someone watching me. Maybe Derek's bank flagged the inquiries. Her lawyer filed an emergency motion claiming I was violating the restraining order by investigating Derek, that the investigation constituted harassment, that it needed to stop immediately. Judge Caldwell granted it. The investigation had to cease within 24 hours. Everything we'd found became useless without the ability to follow the leads. I sat in Margaret's office, defeated. So we have nothing. We have Dr. Coleman's offer to testify, at the cost of her career. That's her choice to make, Sandy. But how could I let her make that sacrifice? The trial was 2 weeks away. Margaret was frank about our chances. Without Dr. Coleman's testimony, we're going to lose. Jonathan Fletcher has built a compelling case. The medical records, the timing, the documented abuse. A jury will look at the evidence and believe you manipulated a sick, vulnerable man. I called Derek one last time. "Used Grace's phone since he'd blocked mine," he answered, not recognizing the number. "Derek, please. We need to talk about your father, about what really happened." "I know what happened. You stole my inheritance. Your father loved you so much. He paid off over $300,000 of your gambling debts. He changed his will to protect you, not to hurt you." There was a long pause. Then Derek laughed, bitter and harsh. "You can't prove any of that. I know about Vincent Corso. I know about the casinos. I know everything." Another pause. When Derek spoke again, his voice was different, uncertain. "How do you—" "Because your father told me. Because he was protecting you until the very end. Even from yourself. If Dad really paid off my debts, where are the records? Where's the proof?" "Brittany took them from your father's office. She's been planning this for months, maybe years." "Derek, she doesn't care about you. She cares about the money. You're just trying to turn me against my wife, because you're losing. I'm trying to tell you the truth, before it's too late, before she destroys both of us." Derek hung up without another word. I thought that was the end, that I'd lost him completely. But the next day, a car pulled up outside Grace's apartment building, a silver Mercedes. Timothy Wright got out, Richard's business partner for 23 years. He looked around nervously before approaching the building. Grace buzzed him up. He stood in the tiny apartment, a successful businessman in a $1,000 suit, looking completely out of place. "Sandy, we need to talk." His voice was shaking. "I know something about what Brittany did, but if I tell you, I'll lose everything too." Timothy sat on Grace's worn couch, his hands clasped between his knees. He looked like a man at confession, waiting to admit sins he'd carried too long. "Richard and I were partners for 23 years, he began. "We built Harris Manufacturing from nothing. We trusted each other with everything." "I know," I said gently. "Richard loved you like a brother. 3 years ago, I did something unforgivable." Timothy's voice cracked. "I embezzled $50,000 from the company." Grace gasped softly beside me. I felt my stomach drop. I had gambling debts, like Derek. I was ashamed. I thought I could borrow the money, pay it back before anyone noticed. He laughed bitterly. "Richard noticed. Of course he noticed." He confronted me. I broke down, confessed everything. "What did Richard do?" "He forgave me. Paid off my debts from his personal account. Made me promise to get help, to never gamble again. He didn't fire me, didn't press charges, just forgave me." Tears ran down Timothy's face. "He saved my life, Sandy. My wife never knew. My kids never knew. I've been clean ever since. Why are you telling me this? Because 6 months ago, Brittany called me. Timothy pulled out his phone, showed me emails. She said she'd discovered the embezzlement while looking through some old company files. She had proof, documentation. She said if I didn't help her build a case against you, she'd expose me. I read the emails, my blood running cold. Brittany had been thorough. She had bank records, internal memos, everything needed to prove Timothy's crime. What did she want you to do? Testify that you were manipulating Richard, that you'd isolated him from the business, that he seemed confused and frightened around you. She coached me on exactly what to say. Did you agree? Timothy's face was anguished. I told her I'd think about it, kept putting her off. But Richard died before I had to decide. Then, when she filed the will contest, she contacted me again, said she'd subpoena me if necessary, that I'd have to choose between lying on the stand or admitting to embezzlement under oath. So what changed? Derek came to see me yesterday. Timothy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He asked me if what you said was true, about his father paying off his gambling debts. I told him yes, that Richard had confided in me, that Richard loved him so much he'd bankrupted himself trying to save him. How did Derek react? He cried. For the first time, I think he really understood what his father had done for him, what he'd thrown away. But then he said he couldn't admit it now, that Brittany would divorce him, that everyone would know he'd lied about you. He's trapped, Sandy, just like I am. Why are you here, Timothy? Because I have emails between Richard and me. Dozens of them over the past 2 years. Richard confiding about Derek's gambling, asking me for advice, discussing his plan to change the will. They prove everything you've been saying. Hope flared in my chest. Can I have them? I brought them. He handed me a flash drive. But there's a problem. Without my testimony to authenticate them, they're just electronic files. Brittany's lawyer will claim they're fake, that you created them, then testify. If I do, Brittany will expose the embezzlement. I'll go to prison, Sandy. My wife will leave me. My 3 kids will lose their father. My daughter's about to start college. My son just got into medical school. If this comes out, it destroys all of them, not just me. We sat in heavy silence. Timothy had brought me the evidence I needed, but it came with an impossible price. I can't ask you to sacrifice your family for me, I said finally. But if I don't, Brittany wins. She gets away with everything, and you lose the life Richard wanted you to have. Richard would tell you to protect your family. He forgave you because he believed in second chances, because he believed people could change. I won't undo that by forcing you to confess. Timothy left the flash drive. Use them however you can. I'm sorry I can't do more. After he left, I gave the flash drive to Margaret. She reviewed the emails with growing excitement. These are perfect. They prove Richard's state of mind. They prove his reasoning. They explain everything. But without Timothy to verify them, there's still evidence. We can argue for their admission. Jonathan Fletcher will fight it. But maybe the judge will allow them. 3 days later, I had to move out of my house. The foreclosure had gone through. I stood in the driveway of the home where I'd raised my son, where I'd laughed and cried and loved for 37 years, and watched strangers carry out my furniture. Grace helped me pack. Everything went into storage except what would fit in her tiny apartment. Living on Grace's couch became my new reality. I had no privacy, no space, no independence. I was 67 years old, completely dependent on my friend's charity. Then Brittany filed the defamation lawsuit officially. $50,000 in damages for claiming Derek had a gambling problem. Margaret explained, "This is strategic. They're opening a second legal front, trying to drain your resources, force you to settle the will contest. What if I just stop defending myself? Let them have everything? Then you're admitting the abuse, admitting to crimes you didn't commit. Sandy, we can't give up." But every day felt like another defeat. My blood pressure spiked again. This time the symptoms were worse. Chest pain, difficulty breathing, vision blurring at the edges. Grace found me collapsed in the bathroom at 3 in the morning. The ambulance ride, the emergency room, the tests showing dangerously high blood pressure and warning signs of a heart attack. The cardiologist prescribed 3 medications. Total cost, $460 a month. I had no insurance and no money. Without these medications, you're at serious risk for stroke or heart attack, the doctor warned. I left the hospital with prescriptions I couldn't fill. Grace tried to pay for them. I wouldn't let her. You've already done too much. Sandy, you need these medications. I'll figure something out. But there was nothing to figure out. I'd sold everything, spent everything, had nothing left. Derek showed up at Grace's apartment a week before the trial. I answered the door, shocked to see my son standing there. For a moment, I thought he'd come to reconcile, to apologize, to admit the truth. Then he handed me papers. "You've been served," he said flatly. "A restraining order." I skimmed the petition. It claimed I'd been harassing him, making threatening phone calls, causing him emotional distress. "I called you once," I said, my voice breaking. "One time, to try to talk to you about your father. My lawyer says this will help our case. Show you're unstable. Prove you were capable of manipulating Dad. Derek, please. I'm your mother. My mother died when my father did." His voice was cold, mechanical, like he'd rehearsed the line. "You're just the woman who stole my inheritance." He turned and walked away. I stood in the doorway, holding papers that legally forbade me from coming within 500 feet of my own son. That night, I sat on Grace's couch at 2 in the morning. The apartment was dark and silent. Grace had gone to bed hours ago, but I couldn't sleep. I thought about Richard, about our 43 years together, about the life we'd built, about everything I'd lost. I thought about Derek, about the sweet boy who'd become this stranger, about the grandson I'd never have, about the family that was destroyed. I thought about giving up, about just letting Brittany have everything. What was the point of fighting when every day brought fresh defeat? My phone rang. 7 in the morning. An unknown number. I answered out of habit. "Mrs. Harris? My name is Dr. Patricia Coleman." The voice from before, but she sounded different now. Stronger, more determined. "I've been following your case. I can't stay silent anymore. I'm willing to testify. I'll tell the court everything about Richard's visits, about the bruises from Derek, about Brittany manipulating me. I know I might lose my license. But I have to do this. Dr. Coleman, there's something else. Something I didn't tell you before. I know exactly how Brittany got Richard's private medical information. She didn't just ask clever questions. She forged documents claiming to be his healthcare proxy. I still have the faxed authorization form she sent. The signature doesn't match Richard's real signature. I compared it to the forms Richard signed himself. My breath caught. She forged his signature? Yes. And I can prove it. That's fraud, Mrs. Harris. That changes everything. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. Hope. Margaret met with Dr. Coleman the next day. They spent 4 hours going through everything. The medical records, the timeline, the forged documents. "This is huge," Margaret said afterward. "If we can prove Brittany committed fraud to access Richard's medical records, the entire foundation of her case collapses." But Dr. Coleman could still lose her license for violating patient confidentiality. Maybe not. If Brittany obtained information through fraud, then the privilege was already violated by illegal means. Dr. Coleman might be protected under whistleblower statutes. It's complicated, but there's a real chance she'll be okay. I called Dr. Coleman. "Are you absolutely sure about this? Your children. I've thought about nothing else for weeks. My children need to see their mother do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it costs something. That's worth more than any career." We had 3 days before trial. Margaret filed emergency motions to admit the forged documents as evidence, to allow Dr. Coleman's testimony, to introduce Timothy's emails. Jonathan Fletcher, Brittany's lawyer, fought back with motion after motion, objected to everything. claimed the documents were inadmissible, claimed Dr. Coleman's testimony violated privilege, claimed the emails were hearsay. Judge Caldwell scheduled a pre-trial hearing to address all the evidentiary issues. Then Brittany made a mistake. She called me, directly, on my cell phone. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number. But something made me press the green button. Sandy. Brittany's voice was smooth as silk, confident. We should talk, woman to woman. We have nothing to say to each other. Oh, I think we do. You're going to lose this trial. You know it. I know it. Why put yourself through the humiliation? I'm willing to offer you a settlement. What kind of settlement? I'll give you $200,000. Enough to live comfortably for a few years. You drop the contest, admit you manipulated Richard, and walk away. Admit to something I didn't do? It's just words, Sandy. Meaningless words. In exchange, you get money and peace. You can rebuild your life. Maybe even repair your relationship with Derek eventually. You'd never let me near Derek. That depends on how cooperative you are. Think about it. The alternative is losing everything in court, getting nothing, spending your final years broke and alone. Her voice turned sharp. Do you really think some doctor and a corrupt business partner are going to save you? I've planned for everything. What do you mean? You'll see soon enough. But I'm giving you this one chance. Take the money, walk away, or lose it all. She hung up. I immediately called Margaret and told her about the conversation. Did you record it? No. Why would I record it? Because now we know she's worried. She wouldn't offer a settlement if she thought she had a sure win. We've rattled her. The pre-trial hearing was the next day. Judge Caldwell's courtroom was intimidating, all dark wood and high ceilings. The seal of Pennsylvania hung behind the judge's bench. Jonathan Fletcher argued against admitting any of our evidence. He was smooth, confident, throwing around legal terms and precedents. Margaret countered every argument, pointed out the fraud, explained why the emails were relevant, detailed why Dr. Coleman's testimony was essential. Judge Caldwell listened to both sides, her face unreadable. Finally, she ruled, I'm going to allow Dr. Coleman to testify, subject to cross-examination. The emails from Mr. Wright will be admitted, but I'm instructing the jury that they must be given less weight without authenticating testimony. The allegedly forged documents will be admitted for the limited purpose of showing possible fraud. It wasn't everything we needed, but it was enough to fight with. As we left the courthouse, Margaret pulled me aside. I need to warn you. Jonathan Fletcher is going to come after you hard. He's going to try to make you look like a gold digger, a manipulator, someone who preyed on a sick old man. You need to be ready. I'll tell the truth. The truth isn't always enough. You need to stay calm, no matter what he says. Don't get emotional. Don't get defensive. Just answer the questions simply and honestly. That night, I tried to prepare. Went over my testimony with Margaret. Practiced staying calm under hostile questioning. But nothing could have prepared me for what Brittany had planned. At 11 p.m., there was a knock on Grace's apartment door. 2 police officers stood in the hallway. Mrs. Sandra Harris? Yes? You're under arrest for violating a restraining order. What? I haven't been anywhere near Derek. You called him 3 times today from this number. They showed me a phone log. I looked at the number. It was Grace's landline. I didn't call him. I haven't used this phone. Ma'am, the calls were made from this location. You need to come with us. They arrested me. Handcuffs. Miranda rights. The whole humiliating process. Grace stood in her doorway, horrified, as they led me away. At the police station, I learned that someone had indeed called Derek 3 times from Grace's apartment. The calls had been made while Grace and I were both at Margaret's office, going over testimony. Someone had broken into the apartment and used the phone, but I couldn't prove it. And with the trial starting the next day, the timing was devastating. They held me overnight. No bail hearing until morning. I sat in a jail cell, the same one I'd been in before, watching my chance at justice slip away. Margaret got me released at 8 in the morning. The trial was scheduled to start at 9:30. This was Brittany, I said, as Margaret rushed me to the courthouse. She set this up, had someone break into Grace's apartment. I know, but we can't prove it. And it makes you look unstable, like you're obsessed with Derek. What do? We go to trial. We tell the truth. We hope the jury sees through her lies. I arrived at the courthouse in the same clothes I'd worn yesterday. I looked exhausted, defeated, broken. Because that's exactly what I was. Brittany arrived minutes later, dressed in a designer suit, perfectly made up, looking confident and beautiful and righteous. We entered the courtroom. Judge Caldwell took the bench. This court is now in session in the matter of Derek Harris and Brittany Harris versus the estate of Richard Harris. Her voice echoed through the high-ceilinged room. Is the plaintiff ready to present their case? Jonathan Fletcher stood, buttoning his suit jacket. We are, Your Honor, and we call our first witness, Mrs. Sandra Harris herself. My legs felt unsteady as I walked to the witness stand. The bailiff held out a Bible. I placed my hand on it, swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Then I sat in the witness chair, facing the courtroom full of people who thought I was a monster. Jonathan Fletcher approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He started gently, asking about my marriage to Richard, about our life together. I answered truthfully, my voice steady, despite the fear churning in my stomach. Then he shifted. Mrs. Harris, you were aware your husband had been diagnosed with dementia, correct? Yes. Early stage. And yet, during this vulnerable time, he changed his will to leave everything to you and nothing to his only son. Doesn't that seem suspicious? Richard had good reasons. Reasons he conveniently can't explain now that he's dead. Fletcher's voice turned sharp. Isn't it true that you isolated Mr. Harris from his son? That you prevented Derek from visiting his own father? No. Derek could visit any time. But he only came when he wanted money. That's your characterization. Do you have proof? Richard told me. Hearsay, Your Honor, Fletcher interrupted. Judge Caldwell nodded. Sustained. Mrs. Harris, you can only testify to what you personally observed. Fletcher continued for another hour, hammering away at every point. The timing of the will change. The medical records showing Richard's complaints. The documented bruises. By the time he finished, I felt like I'd been beaten. Margaret's cross-examination was gentler, letting me explain Richard's concerns about Derek's gambling, his plan to protect the business. But without hard evidence, my words sounded like convenient excuses. The morning dragged on. Fletcher called his witnesses. Character witnesses who testified about my controlling behavior, though most of them barely knew me. An expert on elder abuse, who explained how undue influence works. It all painted a damning picture. Finally, Margaret called Timothy to the stand. Timothy walked up slowly, his face pale. He was sworn in, sat down, gripped the arms of the chair like they were the only thing keeping him upright. Margaret asked him about the emails. Timothy confirmed he'd written them, confirmed Richard had confided in him about Derek's gambling problem and the plan to change the will. Then Fletcher stood for cross-examination. Mr. Wright, do you have any personal reason to want to help Mrs. Harris? Timothy took a deep breath. Here it was. The moment that would destroy him or save me. Yes, I do. The courtroom went silent. 3 years ago, I embezzled $50,000 from Harris Manufacturing. His voice was steady now, resolved. Richard discovered it. Instead of pressing charges, he forgave me and helped me get my life back on track. I owe him everything, and I owe Sandy the truth. The courtroom erupted. Judge Caldwell banged her gavel. Order! Fletcher tried to recover. So you're an admitted criminal, a thief. Why should this court believe anything you say? Because a man doesn't confess to a crime that could send him to prison unless he's telling the truth about something that matters more. Timothy looked directly at the jury. Richard Harris was my best friend. He saved my life, and I won't let his wife be destroyed by lies. Fletcher pushed harder. Isn't it true that Brittany Harris discovered your embezzlement and threatened to expose you if you didn't help Sandy's case? Yes. She tried to blackmail me into lying for her. I refused. And now I'm here, telling the truth and accepting the consequences. Margaret followed up. Mr. Wright, what consequences are you facing by testifying today? My wife didn't know about the embezzlement until this morning, when I told her. She's in the gallery right now, deciding whether to leave me. My business partners are considering whether to press charges. I might go to prison, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. The jury looked moved. This wasn't a man lying to help a friend. This was a man sacrificing everything for the truth. Next, Margaret called Dr. Coleman. Dr. Coleman testified about Richard's visits, about his fear of losing himself to dementia, about his clear-minded discussions of Derek's problems and his plans for the business, about the bruises. Mr. Harris told me his son had grabbed him during arguments about money, Dr. Coleman explained. He showed me the marks. Said Derek was desperate, not violent, but that the conversations had become physical. Fletcher's cross-examination was brutal. Doctor, you're violating patient confidentiality by being here, aren't you? Patient confidentiality was already violated by fraud. What fraud? Dr. Coleman explained about the forged healthcare proxy document, about how Brittany had tricked her into revealing information. Margaret introduced the forged document as evidence, showed it side by side with Richard's real signature on other medical forms. The difference was obvious. Fletcher tried to argue it was irrelevant, that the document's authenticity was a separate issue, but the jury had seen it. The seed of doubt was planted. The trial recessed for lunch. Margaret pulled me aside. We're doing better than I expected, but we need something more. Something that proves Brittany planned this in advance. Like what? Like her admitting it herself. I remembered the phone call, Brittany's confidence, her threats. What if we could get her to take the stand? Her lawyer would never allow it. It's too risky. Then we make him think he has to. That afternoon, Margaret made a calculated move. During Fletcher's examination of his expert witness, she objected repeatedly, challenging the expert's credibility. She was fishing, looking for an opening. Finally, Fletcher made a mistake. Dr. Whitmore, in your professional opinion, did Sandra Harris exhibit classic signs of someone exerting undue influence? Based on the evidence I reviewed, yes. And that evidence included testimony from Brittany Harris about her observations? Yes. Margaret stood. Your Honor, this expert's entire opinion is based on statements from Brittany Harris. We have a right to cross-examine the source of that information. Fletcher argued strenuously, but Judge Caldwell sided with Margaret. If Mrs. Brittany Harris's statements form the basis of expert testimony, she needs to be available for examination. Mr. Fletcher, call your client to the stand. Brittany had no choice. She walked to the stand, her confidence still intact. She was sworn in, sat down, arranged her skirt perfectly. Fletcher questioned her first. She told a convincing story. How she'd watched Sandy isolate Richard. How she'd documented everything out of concern. How she'd only wanted to protect her father-in-law. Then Margaret stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Harris, when did you first become concerned about Sandy's treatment of Richard? About 8 months ago. Around the time Richard was diagnosed with dementia? Yes. Interesting timing. And when did you first contact Dr. Coleman? I don't recall exactly. Margaret pulled out phone records. According to Dr. Coleman's office records, you called her on March 15th. Does that refresh your recollection? If that's what the records show, March 15th was the same day Richard met with his attorney to change his will. Did you know about that meeting? How would I know? That's an excellent question. Margaret approached the witness stand. How did you know to start building a case against Sandy before Richard even died? I didn't. You contacted Dr. Coleman using a forged healthcare proxy. You started documenting alleged abuse 7 months before Richard's death. You researched estate litigation attorneys months in advance. How did you know Richard was going to change his will, unless you'd seen his private documents? Brittany's composure cracked slightly. I was concerned about my husband's father. Concerned enough to commit fraud? Margaret introduced evidence of Brittany's browser history. Searches for contesting a will and undue influence dated before Richard changed his will. These searches show you were planning to challenge the will before it was even created. How is that possible? I was researching in general. Or you had access to Richard's personal files, perhaps during one of your visits to the house when Sandy was at his medical appointments. Brittany's lawyer objected, but the jury had seen her hesitation, her uncertainty. Margaret continued. Mrs. Harris, you called Sandy 2 days ago and offered her a settlement. What did you say during that call? I don't recall. You said, and I quote, I've planned for everything. What did you mean by that? I misspoke. Did you also misspeak when you arranged for someone to break into Grace Patterson's apartment and make phone calls from her landline to frame Sandy for violating a restraining order? That's ridiculous. Is it? The calls were made while both Sandy and Grace were provably elsewhere. Someone broke in and used the phone specifically to get Sandy arrested the day before trial. Who had motive to do that? Fletcher was on his feet, objecting. Judge Caldwell sustained, but the damage was done. The jury was looking at Brittany with suspicion. Margaret pressed harder. Mrs. Harris, did you encourage Derek's gambling? No. Did you know about his debts to Vincent Corso? I don't know who that is. Really? Because Mr. Corso is prepared to testify that you contacted him 6 months ago, asking about Derek's outstanding debts. This was a bluff. Vincent Corso had refused to talk to our investigator, but Brittany didn't know that. Her eyes widened slightly. I was trying to help. Or, you were gathering information to use against Sandy, to prove Derek needed money, to build your case. Margaret paused, then asked the crucial question. Mrs. Harris, isn't it true that you have over $400,000 in personal credit card debt? Fletcher objected. Irrelevant. It goes to motive, Your Honor, Margaret argued. If Brittany Harris is in severe financial distress, that explains why she's so desperate to contest this will. Judge Caldwell allowed it. Brittany had to answer. I have some debt. $417,000, according to credit reports. You're being sued by multiple creditors. If you'd simply waited for Richard to die and inherited through Derek, those creditors would have seized the assets. But if you contest the will and win as Derek's representative, you can structure the inheritance to shield it from your creditors. That's your real motive, isn't it? Brittany's face flushed red. That's not. You targeted Derek specifically because his father was wealthy. You encouraged his gambling to create the exact situation you could exploit. You planned this years in advance. I love my husband. You love his potential inheritance. Fletcher was objecting repeatedly now. The courtroom was in chaos. Judge Caldwell called a recess. During the break, Margaret told me, We've damaged her credibility, but we need something definitive. We need proof she planned this in advance. Timothy approached us in the hallway. Richard gave me something. I didn't want to use it unless absolutely necessary. He made a video. What kind of video? A message. Recorded 3 days before he died. He knew Brittany was planning something. He wanted to make sure his wishes were clear. Margaret's eyes widened. Do you have it? Timothy pulled out a flash drive. I've had it all along. Richard asked me to keep it safe. To only use it if things got bad. I think they're bad enough now. We showed Judge Caldwell the video during the recess. Fletcher tried to object, claiming it should have been disclosed earlier. Judge Caldwell overruled him. This is newly discovered evidence. I'm allowing it. Court reconvened. The lights dimmed. A screen was set up. The video began to play. Richard appeared on screen, sitting in his home office. He looked frail, but his eyes were clear. Alert. Present. This is for my son, Derek, if anything happens to me. Richard's voice filled the courtroom. Son, by the time you see this, I'll be gone. And I know things might be confusing. I know Brittany might have told you things about your mother, about the will. I need you to know the truth. Derek, sitting in the gallery, began to cry. I changed my will to protect you, not to hurt you. You have a gambling problem, Derek. I've paid off your debts twice now. over $300,000. I love you too much to watch you destroy yourself with addiction. Your mother will make sure you're taken care of. She'll help you get treatment. She'll guide the family business until you're ready. Trust her, son. She loves you more than anything." Richard paused, looked directly into the camera. "And Brittany, if you're watching this, and I know you will be, I know what you're doing. I know you've been planning to contest my will. I know about your debts. I know you've been encouraging Derek's gambling. I found the browser history on the computer in the guest room, the searches for estate lawyers, the research on undue influence." The courtroom was utterly silent. "I'm not senile. I'm not being manipulated. I'm dying, and I'm making these decisions with a clear mind and a sound heart. Sandy is innocent of everything you're going to claim. She's been the best wife, the best partner, the best person I've ever known. And if you try to destroy her reputation to steal money that isn't yours, I want it on record. I knew. I knew what you were planning, and I'm telling the truth now, while I still can." Richard's image faded. The lights came back up. The courtroom was in shock. Judge Caldwell had to bang her gavel for order. Fletcher tried to argue the video's authenticity, but it was clearly Richard. His voice, his mannerisms. Recent enough that his illness was visible, but his mind was obviously clear. The video changed everything. Judge Caldwell looked at the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, given this new evidence, I'm going to make a ruling. The video clearly demonstrates Mr. Harris's state of mind and intentions. Combined with the evidence of fraud in obtaining medical records and the questionable timing of Mrs. Brittany Harris's actions, I'm directing a verdict. The will contest is denied. Mrs. Sandra Harris is the rightful heir to Richard Harris's estate." The courtroom erupted. Derek stood, pushing past people, rushing out. Brittany sat frozen, her face pale. Judge Caldwell continued. "Furthermore, I'm referring Mrs. Brittany Harris to the district attorney for investigation of possible fraud, forgery, and attempted extortion. Bailiff, please escort Mrs. Harris into custody pending charges." Police officers approached Brittany. She tried to argue, but they handcuffed her and led her away. I sat in the witness chair, unable to process what had just happened. Margaret was beside me in seconds, hugging me, crying with relief. Outside the courthouse, Derek waited. He looked broken, devastated. When he saw me, he collapsed into sobs. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I held my son for the first time in months. Held him while he cried, while he apologized over and over, while he finally understood what his father had been trying to do. "Your father loved you," I whispered. "I love you. We're going to get you help. We're going to fix this together." It took 6 months to settle Richard's estate. 6 months of paperwork and lawyers and court appearances. But eventually, everything was resolved. I used part of the inheritance to get Derek into the best treatment facility in the country. He spent 90 days there, working through his addiction, understanding how Brittany had manipulated him. He's been sober for 8 months now. We talk every day. I established the Richard Harris Foundation to help families dealing with addiction and elder abuse. We provide legal assistance, counseling, financial support. We help people who are where I was alone, broke, facing impossible odds. Timothy wasn't charged with embezzlement. Richard's recorded forgiveness, combined with the statute of limitations, meant the district attorney declined to prosecute. Timothy resigned from the company anyway, started fresh somewhere else. His wife stayed with him. They're rebuilding their marriage, one day at a time. Dr. Coleman kept her medical license. The medical board recognized that she'd been a victim of fraud and that her testimony helped expose serious crimes. She's still practicing, still helping patients. Brittany was charged with fraud, forgery, and attempted extortion. She pleaded guilty to avoid trial and served 18 months in federal prison. Derek divorced her while she was incarcerated. Last I heard, she'd moved to another state, trying to rebuild her life far from the wreckage she'd created here. I sit in the garden of my home, the home I kept on a warm spring afternoon. Derek comes to visit every week now, usually on Sundays. Today, he brought his sponsor from his addiction recovery group. They're planting a tree in Richard's memory, a red oak that will grow tall and strong, just like the values Richard tried to instill in our son. Derek looks up from the hole he's digging, dirt on his hands, sweat on his forehead. Dad would be proud of you, Mom. The way you fought. The way you never gave up. He'd be proud of both of us, I say. Proud that we got back up. We embrace. Father's son and father's wife. A family healing. A family moving forward together, with the foundation Richard gave us. Not money, but love. Not inheritance, but integrity. Not wealth, but wisdom earned through suffering and triumph. The sun sets over the garden, painting everything gold. I miss Richard every day. I'll miss him for the rest of my life. But I know I honored his wishes, protected our son, stood up to injustice, and won not just in court, but in the ways that truly matter. I learned something through all of this, something I want to share with you. I learned that truth doesn't always prevail on its own. Sometimes you have to fight for it, even when you're exhausted and everyone's against you. Sometimes you have to stand up when it would be easier to fall down. Richard used to say, "When you fall, you get back up. That's what our family does." He was right. And now Derek is learning that too. Learning that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up when everyone expects you to stay down. Have you ever faced a situation where everything seemed lost, where people turned against you, where truth felt buried under lies? How did you find the strength to keep going? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who's facing their darkest moment right now. If this story touched your heart or gave you hope, please consider liking this video and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And subscribe to this channel for more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and finding the courage to overcome. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for taking this journey with me. I hope you're never in the position I was in, but if you are, I hope you remember. You're stronger than you think. Truth matters. Justice is worth fighting for. And family, real family, is worth everything. May you never have to fight as hard as I did. But if you do, may you find the strength to get back up, no matter how many times you fall.